Chapter 14. The Start of Rise of the Silver Surfer. 1 year later, June-ish, 2007. Last night, the FFA was forced to the ground all aircrafts, leaving thousands stranded when electronic failures and mysterious power outages crippled the western United States. But the big story today, the much-anticipated wedding of the fantastic couple, Reed Richards and Susan Storm, will take place this Saturday, the woman on the news said as Susan stares at the TV, and Reed looking up from his booklet and shakes his head. "Okay, kids, I am going to give you something special. It is called thing dust," Ben says as he gives a little dust to the kids from his fingers. Unbelievable, bizarre anomalies are occurring all over the world, defying every law of physics, and all the media care about is what China pattern we picked, Reed says as everyone is doing their own thing. Madison does a little smile to the kids as she signs a poster of herself for them, but she does not speak much as she hates being seen in public as a celebrity. "What did you pick? The blue ones with them little flowers? I like them," Ben asks as he walks over to Reed and Susan. "Excuse me, would you mind?" A fan asks Ben for a picture. "It's happening again, isn't it?" Susan asks, and Reed looks at her before answering. "No, we're not postponing anything, not this time. This will be the wedding you dreamed of. I will not let anything get in the way, not even the mysterious transformation of matter at the subatomic level," Reed tells Susan, and Susan smiles. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me," Susan says, which is really pathetic when you think about it. Johnny chuckled, and he sees Madison giving him a look. "Dr. Richards, I'm very sorry, but we're overbooked. We do have seats available in coach," the flight attendant said, which made Reed look back at Ben before looking at his watch that Madison made, and looked back at the flight attendant. "That should be fine," Reed replied. Madison, sitting off to the side signing a poster for another shy child, froze mid-signature and frowned slightly. "Fine?" she thought. Since when does Reed Richards call Coach fine? Madison tilted her head, puzzled as she watched Reed close his booklet, and walked straight over to Ben. Ben crossed his massive arms. "What is with the grin, Stretch? You know I do not fit in coach." Reed tapped the side of the watch, lowering his voice so only Ben could hear. "This isn't mine, Ben. Madison made this for you. Remember Christmas last year? She used her powers to design it, to give you the choice you've been wanting." He pointed to a recessed button on the side. "All you have to do is press here, and you'll be able to shift back into your human form, at will, and then return to the thing whenever you need to." Ben glanced down at the device, his rocky features softening as his thumb brushed over the button. He already knew what it could do. Madison had told him the night she gave it to him, her hands shaking as she explained. Still, hearing Reed acknowledge it out loud hit different. A quiet smile tugged at his mouth. "Hard to believe you two pulled it off. I get to be me again, whenever I want." After a while, they all got onto the plane after Ben used the watch for the first time and turned into himself in human form. Ben looks for his seat, and when he spots it, he notices a man and a woman sat on left and right. That's my seat, sorry," Ben said. Reed looks around to look where to put his luggage before noticing an empty space before looking around, and uses his powers to put the luggage into that space. Madison, seated across the aisle, raised her eyebrows at him. "You know, normal people just ask the flight attendant for help," she said, her lips twitching into a smirk. Reed gave her an awkward smile as his arm snapped back into place. "Normal's never really worked for us," he admitted. Johnny leans on the seat near Susan and Reed. "What if we get an endorsement from an airline? Get us a private jet?" Johnny asked. "I think we have enough endorsement deals," Susan said, her voice calm, but edged with the faintest trace of irritation, which causes Johnny to laugh. "That's funny," Johnny says before looking over to Reed as he continues. "Seriously, Reed, it could help subsidize your little inventions." "No thanks," Reed said flatly, clearly finished with the subject. A passenger tapped on Johnny's arm as she says, "Excuse me?" And Johnny took the opportunity to rise from his seat with that same cocky grin plastered on his face. "Consider it," he said smoothly. "Talk to you later." "Johnny, where are you going?" Susan called after him, her patience already thinning. "I don't fly, Coach," Johnny says before leaving, and Madison rolls her eyes. The next minute, Johnny is outside as the plane took off, and flying in his fire form, which Ben sees and closes the window. "I hope it rains," Ben mumbles to himself quietly. That gave Madison an idea. A mischievous smirk tugged at her lips as her fingers tingled with warmth again. She didn't push it, not exactly, but she thought of it. The image of Johnny on fire outside, so sure with himself, only to be rained on. Almost instantly, tiny storm cloud that zipped out toward Johnny's glowing form in the sky. Outside, however, Johnny flamed on and flying past the plane with a cocky grin before the cloud opened above him. Rain poured down in a concentrated burst, sizzling against his fire like water on a hot pan. He yelped, sputtering in surprise, his flame flickering wildly as he tried to dodge the storm, not knowing that it's Madison's doing. "Hey, who ordered the weather upgrade?" Johnny shouted indignantly through the comms, his voice cracking. Ben tilted his head, watching droplets streak across the window, and let out a satisfied grunt. "Finally," he said. Susan gave Madison a long, suspicious look, but Madison only shrugged her shoulders innocently, like she didn't summon a rain cloud to appear. Chapter 15. The General's Warning. As Reed, Ben, and Johnny went to the club, Madison and Susan decided to do a girls' night in after Madison begged, saying, "Oh, come on, Sue Bug. We haven't spent enough time with each other since you were busy with your wedding plans." As Madison was in the middle of painting Susan's nails, she hears Roberta greet someone, and she puts the nail polish away, and she follows Susan to the front, and she sees General Hager and the rest of the army men. "Hello?" Susan asked as she looks at General Hager before looking to Roberta the hologram. "Thanks, Roberta." "We're here to see Dr. Richards," Hager said firmly. Susan's brow arched. "He's not here. Can I help you?" "Yes," Hager replied flatly. "You can take me to see Dr. Richards." "That didn't sound like a request," Madison muttered under her breath. "Unfortunately," Susan murmured back before sighing. "Okay." Together, Susan and Madison led Hager into the noisy club where Reed, Johnny, and Ben were supposed to be. The pulsing bass and flashing lights hit them immediately. Madison wrinkled her nose at the stench of cheap liquor and perfume. Susan and Hager's eyes landed on Reed, who was dancing on the dance floor with two girls. "There he is," Hager said sharply. "Yes," Susan replied icily. "Unfortunately for him. Shall we?" Beside her, Madison bit her lip to suppress a laugh. "Oh, Reed, you're in trouble." Johnny notices Madison, Susan, and Hager before turning Ben and himself around. "I think it might be clobberin' time," Ben rumbled after switching the watch to make him turn into the thing. Reed froze when he saw them approaching. "Sue, what are you— General Hager." "Let's talk somewhere private," Hager said curtly. Susan's voice was as sharp as glass. "Unless you need to do jello shots off someone's stomach." Madison's eyebrows shot up and she pulls a face as she looks over to Reed, knowing he's in trouble. Reed lifted his hands quickly. "I was explaining to the girls about how the Big Bang led to—" Madison coughed into her fist, hiding her grin. "This was Johnny's idea?" Reed finished weakly. "I just went along." Johnny raised his glass across the room. "Don't blame me, Stretch." Everyone moves to a quieter room. "How does Reed know the general?" Susan asks Ben. "A few years back," Ben explained from behind them, "the guy was pushing a new missile defense system. Reed testified that the technology wouldn't work." Hager stopped once they reached a private space. His tone clipped. "I'm only here, Richards, because I'm under direct orders from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Personally, I don't like sharing sensitive information with a civilian." Everyone took their places. Madison stood just behind Reed, arms folded, as Frankie Ray laid files across the table. Out of the corner of her eye, Madison caught Johnny's gaze. He was smiling soft, almost genuine. But when Frankie shifted, Madison thought the smile was meant for her instead. She quickly looked away, her stomach twisting. "Especially one who enjoys the public spotlight so much," Hager continued, his eyes narrowing at Reed. "Always a pleasure to see you too, General," Reed said smoothly. "What can I do for you?" "As you may know, there've been unusual occurrences. Officially, we've downplayed their significance, but we're concerned these anomalies might pose a credible threat to our national security," Hager says. Frankie starts to pull out the satellite pictures and passes them over to Reed. "These were taken by one of our spy satellites 3 days ago," Frankie explained. Reed, Susan, and Madison leaned forward together. Madison's eyes traced the glowing trails, her chest tightening with something she couldn't name. The edges of the photo seemed to hum faintly to her, as if they wanted to come alive under her fingertips. She shoved her hands into her pockets before anyone noticed. "What is it?" Susan asked. "We were hoping Dr. Richards could tell us," Hager said. "I'm afraid I've never seen anything like it," Reed admitted, passing the photos to Ben. "Ben?" Ben looks at the images before saying, "Well, I'd say it was a meteor, but the trail's all wrong. This thing's given off its own energy." "Take a look at this," Hager said, as Frankie pulls up another image on a computer. "These have been appearing in remote areas throughout the world since the event started," Frankie said. "Field personnel estimate its diameter to be 200 meters. If we're going to find out what this is all about, we need a way to locate and intercept that object," Hager says. Johnny, sitting opposite Frankie, wasn't even looking at the photos. His gaze had drifted back to Madison. She caught him staring again, but this time she thought he was smiling at Frankie instead. Her chest sank, and she turned her head away quickly, missing the flicker of disappointment in Johnny's eyes. Reed studied the images. It'd be possible to build a sensor, tie it into the Baxter Building satellite grid. Then we can pinpoint the exact location of the object. Susan crossed her arms and turned her face aside. Madison noticed instantly. She doesn't like that he's slipping back into science mode over wedding mode again, she thought. "I'm afraid I can't," Reed interrupted. The room went still. Susan's head snapped toward him, just as Madison's did. "What?" Hager barked. Reed held firm. "You see, I'm getting married this Saturday. I just don't have the time." "Richards, your country needs your help," Hager said sharply. "Look," Reed said, "why don't you call Professor Jeff Wagner? He's head of the physics department at Brown." "I expected more, Richards," Hager said coldly, "even from you." With that, the army men gathered their files and marched out, leaving the team in silence. Madison stayed where she was behind Reed, staring at the now closed door. Slowly, she exhaled, shaking her head. The world might be on the brink of something terrifying, and all I can think about is whether Johnny Storm was smiling at me or someone else. Chapter 16. The Circus Outside. Baxter Building, night. Reed is outside on the balcony building. The senor he has not told Susan, Ben, Madison, or Johnny that was building it, before Ben walks out and squinted when he saw Reed. "Hey, what are you doing up here?" he asked, his tone curious. "Nothing. Just, needed some air," Reed said, trying to sound casual, but his hands betrayed him as they tightened on the machine. "I'm guessing Susie doesn't know anything about it," Ben tells Reed, and Reed panics for a moment as he looks over to Ben, but Ben puts his hands up as he was about to speak, but someone cut in. "And I'm guessing you weren't planning on telling me either," Madison said softly, stepping forward with her arms crossed. Her tone was calm, but there was a sharp edge underneath it. "Mads," Reed began, already sounding guilty. "Don't worry, kiddo, I already told him my lips are sealed," Ben said with a chuckle, trying to lighten the tension. "Yeah, well, secrets don't stay secrets long in this family," Madison said, her voice faltering for just a second as she looked at Reed. "Just do not tell Johnny," Reed begs them. The sound of flames roared above them, cutting him off. Johnny landed with his usual flair, boots hitting the rooftop with a solid thud. "Don't tell Johnny what?" Johnny says as he walks over to them. "Great," Reed muttered under his breath. "Are you building that thing?" Johnny asked, his grin widening. "No, Reed tries to explain, but Johnny cuts him off with a little laugh. "If Sue finds out, you're gonna get an invisible kick in the nuts," Johnny teased. Hey, we're keeping this quiet," Ben says firmly as his hand lands on Johnny's chest. "I know," Johnny said with a shrug. "Don't worry," Ben added. Madison let out a sigh, looking at the three of them, caught between loyalty to her sister and the mess of secrets she was now part of. "Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?" she muttered, her voice laced with equal parts sarcasm and quiet worry. Madison stays quiet for a moment before grabbing Johnny's hand and dragging him away from Reed and Ben. "Hey, what's this about?" Johnny asked, frowning as she dragged him aside. "I need a favor," Madison said quickly, lowering her voice so the others could not hear. "At Sue Bug's wedding, I want you to bring another woman with you. Pretend it is me." Johnny blinked, staring at her like she had grown another head. "What?" No way. Why would I do that? I am not dragging some random girl around just so people think she is you. Johnny, please, Madison said, her tone softening. She fiddled with the hem of her sleeve and avoided his eyes. You know I hate being out there. The cameras, the flashing lights, the questions, I cannot stand it. Everyone watching me. It is suffocating. Johnny's mouth opened to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She was not just being stubborn. She was serious, vulnerable. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You are really asking me to do this? To make it look like you are out there when you are not? Yes, Madison said firmly. Just this once, for me. Johnny studied her for a long moment before groaning. Ugh, fine, but I am not happy about it. Her lips curved into a grateful smile as she squeezed his arm. Thank you. Johnny shook his head, muttering, You owe me big time, before letting her hand drop. The news reporter's voice carried over the swarm of cameras and microphones outside the Baxter building. It's the wedding of the century. Reed Richards and Susan Storm, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, will try again to tie the knot today in a ceremony here in New York. Johnny, sitting in his car with a striking brunette beside him, groaned as he spotted the wall of reporters waiting. Look at these parasites, he muttered, shaking his head. It's unbelievable, the woman said, her tone half shocked, half amused. He stepped out with his usual showman's grin, tugging his date out with him. Immediately cameras flashed in their faces. Johnny raised his hands. Hey, listen, everybody, he said loudly, his voice carrying over the chaos. This is an incredibly special day for my sister, the most important day of her life. So I just want to say to you guys, please respect our privacy. Come on, Johnny, one of the reporters shouted. Johnny chuckled, smirking as if he had been waiting for the moment. I am just kidding. We are going to be auctioning off the exclusive wedding photos to the highest bidder, so go online and place your bids. Thank you. The reporters laughed, shouting more questions. One woman pushed forward with her microphone. So what does it take to date the Human Torch? From inside the building, Madison stood at the window, her body stiffening instantly. Her nails dug into the edge of the curtain as she watched Johnny flash his signature grin. He did not, oh my God, he did. She had not told him to say they were dating, only to bring someone. Now every camera would be connecting that stranger to her. Fireproof lingerie and a lot of aloe, Johnny's date teased into the microphone. Johnny chuckled. Thank you, he said smoothly, giving the cameras a wink through his sunglasses. Madison's stomach twisted. Her eyes flicked sideways, finding Susan standing at another window, her expression heavy as she took in the circus outside. This isn't how I imagined it, Susan murmured, her breath fogging against the glass. Behind her, Alicia sat on the bed. It never is, she said gently. Susan shook her head. No, Alicia. It does not feel right. Sweetie, Alicia said with a soft chuckle, I think even superheroes are allowed to have wedding day jitters. It's more than that, Susan whispered. Her voice wavered as she turned from the window. Is my life always going to be a circus? Do we really want to raise kids in all this? Face it, we are not exactly normal. Madison lowered her eyes, biting her lips softly at the words. The thought burrowed into her. Normalcy, family, kids. Did her own path ever make room for that? Alicia gave Susan's hand a squeeze. Ben and I aren't normal, but we don't let it get in the way of us being happy. Madison thinks about that line, and she bites her lips softly as Susan's breath caught, as if the simplicity of it hit home. Do you love Reed? Alicia asked. More than I've ever loved anyone, Susan answered without hesitation. Then you have nothing to worry about, Alicia finishes with. Susan does a little smile before walking over to hug her. Thank you, she whispered before wiping at her eyes. Okay, Susan said, turning toward the mirror, trying to gather herself. She froze. Oh, great. What? Alicia asked, suddenly alarmed. I got a zit, Susan groaned. Alicia tried not to laugh. Can't you put makeup on it? No, I got it, Susan says as she uses her powers to cover up her zit. Crisis averted. Now all I have to do is concentrate on that area continuously for the next 8 hours." Madison smiled faintly at her sister's stubbornness, though her thoughts still lingered on Johnny outside. If this was already such a circus, what would happen when the cameras realized she wasn't the one in Johnny's spotlight?